At Christmas dinner, my brother announced that he was adopting my son. I thought I misheard him over the clinking of wine glasses. My name's Daniel Reed. I'm 34. And on Christmas night, in front of my parents, and a plate of overcooked ham, my younger brother announced he was going to adopt my son. For a second, I thought I'd misheard him over the clinking of wine glasses. 8-year-old Oliver was right there beside me, sculpting mashed potato mountains and using a green bean as a crane. The room smelled like cinnamon and floor polish, and the old grandfather clock in the hallway ticked like a metronome for bad news. I set my fork down and stared at Julian. "What did you just say?" Julian cleared his throat, suddenly fascinated by a wrinkle in the tablecloth. "Only that, given how hard things have been for you lately, and considering how much time Ollie spends at our place," he glanced at my wife. Tessa. Tessa stepped in, the way she always does when Julian tosses a match and steps back. "We just think it might be more stable for him. Better schools in our district. More support. Structure." She said structure, like it was a gift you could wrap with ribbon. The room went dead silent. My mother folded her napkin into smaller and smaller squares. My dad kept his eyes on his plate, as if peas could teach him how to disappear. Julian's wife, Camille, held her phone upright. Recording like this was a surprise party, instead of a mutiny. Oliver hummed to himself and planted a cranberry on his potato peak, like a red flag. "You're talking about my child like he's a sofa. You want to move into your living room," I said. The words came out calmer than I felt. Inside, it was a fire door buckling. Julian leaned forward, elbows on the table. That patronizing tone I've known since we were kids rolling off him as smooth as ever. "Danny, be realistic. You're working 2 jobs just to keep the lights on." "Because the lights cost money," I shot back. "Because everything does. For as long as I remember," he continued, unharmed by any words that weren't his. "You've been good with your hands. But this isn't about pride, this is about giving Oliver opportunities you can't." My mother finally spoke, barely above a whisper. "Maybe they have a point. Sweetheart. It's not about you. It's about Oliver having everything he needs." Heat rushed to my face. "How long have you all been planning this behind my back?" Tessa shifted in her chair. "It's not like that." "It sounds exactly like that." Camille lowered her phone and put on her practiced, reasonable smile. "Daniel, I don't make this harder than it has to be. Oliver loves it at our house. He has his own room. We bought him that gaming setup he wanted." And there it was. The missing puzzle piece. The expensive gifts Oliver had been bringing home. The new hoodie that definitely didn't come from the discount rack. The pair of sneakers so white, they glowed. I'd told myself Tessa must have found a deal. I wanted to believe good news could just be good news. "You've been grooming him," I said, my voice rising despite myself. "Making him think your house is better than ours." Oliver finally looked up. "What does grooming mean?" "It means nothing, buddy." Julian cut in quickly, his eyes flicking a warning at me. "The adults are just talking." "No," I said, leaning toward my son. "Oliver, I did Uncle Julian and Aunt Camille tell you that you might live with them?" Oliver nodded, eyes wide and trusting. "They said I could have the big room with the PlayStation and the light-up desk. And I wouldn't have to change schools if we can't pay rent." He looked down at his plate like the potatoes might swallow him up. The casual way he said it broke something I didn't know could break again. My 8-year-old was rehearsing our bills like vocabulary words. I felt a dull pressure behind my eyes. Tessa reached across the table and touched my wrist. "Danny, please, think about it logically. We can't keep living paycheck to paycheck. The notices on the door, the shut-off warnings, he deserves better. So you decided to give him away," I said, without discussing it with me. "His father. We tried to bring it up before," Julian said with a sigh. "You always get defensive." "When?" I asked. Each word clipped. "Did you try to discuss stealing my son?" Silence. The kind that has texture. Somewhere in the house. The heating duct ticked and settled. The clock in the hallway counted our breaths. My dad cleared his throat and straightened his napkin. "Son, sometimes we have to make hard choices for the people we love." "Don't," I snapped. pointing at him before I could stop myself. Don't you dare make this sound noble. This is about money and control. Julian pulled out his phone and started scrolling like he was checking weather. I've already spoken with a family attorney, he said. The process is straightforward when both biological parents consent. Both parents, I repeated. I never consented to anything. That's when the room changed temperature. Tessa and Julian exchanged a look so fast, I might have missed it if I wasn't already falling. Camille set her phone flat on the table, face down like a card she didn't want to play yet. You can't just adopt my son, I said, my voice shaking. Julian lifted a neat manila folder from his lap, as if it had been waiting for a cue. Actually, we've started the paperwork. Tessa signed her consent last week. I stared at my wife. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Her jaw trembled. Barely. Like a string pulled too tight. I remembered the late nights when I'd come home from the warehouse and the kitchen would go quiet. Tessa texting in the hallway, saying it was just her sister. Julian lingering after dropping Oliver off on Sundays, making easy jokes. Inspecting the smoke detector, he claimed to hear beeping. Breadcrumbs. All of them. I should have known. Daddy. Are you okay? Oliver asked. Voice, small and hopeful. Like, if I said yes, then it would be true. Julian reached across and ruffled his hair, acting like benevolence had always been his job. Don't worry, buddy. You're coming to live with us. Permanently. Oliver's face brightened with the kind of smile you only give adults when they promise you the moon. Really, forever. I pressed my fingers into the edge of the table until the wood bit back. The room tunneled. The gravy boat, shaped like a silly ceramic goose, suddenly looked like a museum artifact from a nuclear site, familiar and wrong at the same time. I could feel everyone waiting for me to explode or fold. Those always seemed to be the two options people gave me: blow up or give in. For as long as I remember, I said quietly, mostly to myself, you've wanted to fix me. Julian didn't deny it. He didn't have to. The smirk at the corner of his mouth said enough. I thought about the last 3 months like I was flipping through receipts. On October 3rd, I borrowed $620 from Julian to catch up on the power bill. He said, just pay me when you can. But later he mentioned it to my dad at a barbecue, as if he were donating to a charity. On November 14th, Camille texted Tessa a link to a $299 gaming console deal and bought it an hour later because we couldn't let Oliver miss out. She sent a video that night, Oliver doing a happy dance in their living room. On December 7th, the PTA posted a donors list. Julian and Camille read, $250 to the book drive. Oliver's teacher thanked them in front of the class. And Oliver told me, carefully, that his reading group got new chapter books thanks to Uncle Julian. Every step looked like kindness if you didn't squint. Every step put 1 more inch between me and my son. Earlier that afternoon, before we drove over, Tessa had fussed over a mustard stain on Oliver's sweater, scrubbing with dish soap and humming off key. It was such a small, ordinary moment that I let myself believe in ordinary outcomes. It'll come out, I told her. And she smiled without looking at me. The stain didn't fully disappear. A faint yellow half-moon lingered near the pocket no one else would have noticed. I kept seeing it now. That stubborn crescent. Like a warning I ignored. I wanted to speak. To say something that would set the room back on its hinges. I saw all the old scenes stack up: Julian at 16, winning awards and stapling his ribbons to his bedroom wall. Me at 16. Changing oil in our neighbor's garage because I liked the way engines made sense. Mom praising Julian for thinking big. Dad telling me I had good hands. Back then, it felt like roles. Tonight, it felt like a verdict. Danny, Tessa said softly, we're not trying to hurt you. We just want what's best for Oliver. Then why didn't you talk to me like a partner? I asked. Why did you sign papers in secret? She swallowed. Because every time we brought up money, you heard judgment. Because every time you brought up money, I said. It came wrapped in Julian's voice. The clock ticked. Camille's phone buzzed against the wood and stopped. Somewhere in the kitchen. The dishwasher clicked and began its slow, watery heartbeat. The world was moving even if I wasn't. Julian pushed the folder toward me. Look it over. It doesn't have to be contentious. You'd still see him. We can make a schedule that works with your shifts. Ollie will thrive. Better neighborhood. Better school. He already loves it there. I didn't touch the folder. I watched Oliver push his cranberry flag deeper into the mashed potatoes until it vanished. He giggled. It was a sound that should have lived in a different scene. I should have known. I said. All the late drop-offs. The why don't we keep him tonight? You look tired. The let him stay during the week. It's closer to his school. You dress this as help. Julian didn't blink. Sometimes, help looks like hard truth. And sometimes hard truth looks like theft. I replied. My mother whispered. Don't say that word. What word would make you more comfortable? I asked. But I already knew there wasn't one. There never is. When comfort is the prize, and the cost. I could feel something else, stirring underneath my anger. Something colder, and more precise. The way ice forms under a thin layer of slush. A memory flickered an email subject line from last month. A lab's name. The word results. I had told myself I'd requested those documents for insurance reasons. For school forms. For clarity. I hadn't shown anyone. Not even Tessa. I had tucked the PDF away in a folder on my phone and gone back to work because there was always another shift to cover. Another bill to juggle. Now. With Julian's folder half an inch from my hand and Oliver's future spoken about like a project plan, I felt that memory click into place. It wasn't a solution. Not yet. But it was a shape in the dark. And I was suddenly very aware of it. Julian smiled. Like this was all finally going the way it should. He had always been good at smiling at the end of his own sentences. We can file first week of January. He said. No point dragging this out. I looked at my son. At the faint mustard crescent near his sweater pocket. At his hopeful eyes trained on the adults to see what world we would make for him with our next sentence. My chest hurt. I took a slow breath and felt the table under my palms. Solid. Ordinary. Stubborn as a life, you refuse to surrender. I hear you. I said. All of you. And for the first time that night, I let myself think about the email with the lab's letterhead. Waiting quietly in my phone. Untouched. I didn't say anything else. Not yet. The clock ticked once. Twice. Like it was counting down to a different kind of conversation. For the next few seconds after Julian slid that folder toward me, nobody breathed. Then the moment fractured, the dishwasher hummed louder. The ice maker clunked. Camille's phone buzzed again, and she silenced it with a delicate tap. Ordinary sounds. Like nothing extraordinary was happening. I pushed my chair back. It scraped the floor in a long grip. Ugly note. I'm taking Oliver for a walk. I said. We need air. Julian's eyebrow twitched. We should keep this constructive. Constructive, I repeated. Looking from him to Tessa. You've been doing construction for months. I'm just now seeing the blueprint. Oliver slid off his chair. Grabbing his coat from the banister. The sleeve snagged on a splinter. I freed it with my thumbnail and we stepped out into the raw December cold. The neighborhood smelled like chimneys and wet leaves. Light leaked from living room windows up and down the street. Families. Movies. Bowls of popcorn. The gentle buzz of people who trusted each other. Oliver kicked at a drift. Are we in trouble? No. I stuffed my hands in my pockets. We're in a conversation that should have happened a different way. He was quiet for a while. Our breaths fogging. Uncle Julian's house has the chair that spins. He offered. Carefully. Like a neutral fact. And they have cocoa with the tiny marshmallows. I know. I looked at him. Do you like being there? I like being wherever you are. He said quickly. Then. Softer. And I like their dog. He doesn't shed. We walked past the Miller place where the plastic reindeer had toppled into the hedge. Half a block later. Oliver spoke again. If we lived there. Would you come visit every day? My heart pinched. If you lived anywhere else. I would show up every day I could. But we haven't decided anything. Nobody decided anything without you and me. That's not what they said. He murmured. I crouched, so we were eye level. Listen to me. Grown-ups say things when they're excited. Or scared. Or sure they're helping. It doesn't make them in charge of our hearts. You and me, we're a team. Okay. He nodded. Eyes shining. A rooftop Santa, somewhere nearby, wobbled in the wind and squeaked. It sounded like uncertainty in a cheap suit. Back at the house, the warmth hit us like a wall. The second we stepped inside. This astut. Can we please talk privately? I sent Oliver to the den to build a racetrack out of presents, ribbon, and paper towel tubes. He went willingly. Relief visible in his shoulders. When the door clicked behind him, I turned to the table. Some ground rules. No recording, I said to Camille, who lifted both hands and flipped her phone onto the table again. No more surprises. If you've done anything else without telling me, I say it now. Julian sat back. A man who believed in inevitable outcomes. We met with the attorney on December 12th. He said. Initial consultation fee was $200. We brought Oliver's school records because stability is a factor. Tessa flinched. I told them his teacher's name. That's it. On December 18th, Camille attet. We emailed the school counselor to ask about transfer timelines. Just informational. The words stacked in my head like bricks met. Brought. Emailed. Did you list yourselves as emergency contacts? Silence again. Quick and sharp. Tessa. Only as backups. You work nights. If there's a problem. There was already a number 2 and number 3. I cut in. My friend Gabe. My boss during my shift. You replace them. Julian laced his fingers together. We consolidated. It's more efficient for the school to call us since Ollie's with us so much. I felt that cold. Precise thing. Turn another notch. How much is so much? Tessa's voice went small. Weekends. Sometimes Mondays. When you picked up extra hours. I reached for facts to stabilize myself. Let's talk dates. October 3rd. $620 loan for the power bill. October 21st, you bought Oliver a pair of sneakers. 79 美元. Because the class was going on a hike, and we couldn't find his old pair. November 14th, the $299 console. November 20th. You paid the $58 for the field trip I said we could cover on Friday. November 28th, you sent a $75 gift card for family groceries after we said we were fine. December 7th, $250 to the book drive. In your names? Does that sound right? Camille blinked. You keep a ledger. I keep a life. I said. And lately, it's been invaded by your generosity. My mother made a noise like a tired kettle. They helped. Daniel. They helped create an argument they could win. I replied. More evenly than I felt. Tessa's eyes shone. That's not fair. What's not fair? I said. Is promising an 8-year-old a life upgrade without telling his parent who moves boxes for a living why there are suddenly more boxes to move. Julian leaned forward, seizing what he thought was a reasonable angle. Let's talk about stability. Oliver has slept at our place 22 nights since October 1st. He eats breakfast at our table 3 or 4 times a week. He's calm there. He has a routine. He has had to adapt. I said. Kids are adaptable. That's not the same as saying he belongs somewhere else. He belongs where he thrives. Julian countered. The way you say that, I said, makes it sound like a test I've already failed. He opened the folder, sliding a form toward me. This is a temporary guardianship agreement. It's not even adoption yet. A trial period. Essentially, we can file it with the court in January. It gives us the authority to make decisions when you're unavailable. I scanned the page. The words swam. But I anchored on specific sections about medical consent, school decisions, duration. Tessa's signature curled there, in blue ink, December 19th. The line for the second parent. Blank. Tessa caught me looking. I didn't want to go behind your back, she said. But every time the rent was late. Say the number, I said gently. Surprising myself with the softness. She swallowed. We were short $1. 200 inches November. We still haven't caught up. And you thought giving up Oliver would balance the ledger? She flinched like I'd slapped the table. I thought giving him steady mornings would stop the stomachaches. We'd both noticed those Oliver curling around himself on the couch before school, saying his belly felt tight. In his face gray like a storm warning. I remembered rubbing his back and whispering, "It's okay. It's just nerves." While wondering if nerves was a cheap word for the way adults rearrange your life without asking, Julian pointed to another sheet. The attorney said, "Judges look for the least disruptive environment. Our district offers after-school robotics. He could join in January. He likes cardboard castles and drawing imaginary maps." I said, "He's 8. He builds things because imagination is free. Robotics can be creative." My dad cleared his throat. "Boys need structure. They also need to be believed." I said, "When they say they're scared?" He looked at his hands. "Nobody's calling Oliver a leer. Nobody's calling him anything at all." I said, "You're all talking around him like the center of a maze." Tessa rubbed her temples. "Can we stop fighting and figure out the best plan? Maybe a schedule where he splits time. Like a custody arrangement. Comme il le supplied. 50-50. But under our roof for school nights." I stared at her. "Do you hear yourself?" Julian exhaled like I was missing a train he'd thoughtfully paid for. "Danny. We're offering a solution. You won't have to juggle weeknights. You can take better shifts. We can even help you get into a certificate program. HVAC. Maybe. By summer, you could be making—" "Please stop," I said. "Stop pretending this is philanthropy." Camille looked offended. "It is compassion. It is control," I said, wrapped in a bow. Silence again. Then a small sound, the den door opening. Oliver stood there, clutching 2 paper towel tubes he'd taped into a bridge. "Can someone hold this while I add the ramp?" My mother popped up like a spring. "I'll help." "Darling." She ushered him back into the den with an overly bright smile. The door closed, and the house swallowed the noise. Tessa's voice trembled. "If we don't accept help, what's your plan?" "Daniel." I thought of the lab email. A sealed envelope on a screen. Waiting. I kept my face neutral. "My plan is to start by telling the truth. To each other. Including the parts that will make this room colder." Julian gave a dry laugh. "Dramatics won't change math. Math is why I keep receipts." I said. "Truth is why I keep other things." He tilted his head. "Other things?" I didn't answer. "Not yet." The DNA results pressed against my mind like a hot coin. I tasted metal. I thought about consequences folding outward, not just for Julian's plan, but for Tessa. For our parents who had loved a story about noble sacrifice because it was tidier than the story about betrayal and control. I set the temporary guardianship form down and slid it back across the table. "I won't sign this." Tessa's shoulders crumpled. "Then what?" "We slow down." I said. "We talk to a neutral mediator. And we stop making promises to Oliver that depend on me disappearing." Julian's patience thinned. "Courts move on facts, not feelings. The facts are you're under financial strain. Your household is inconsistent. Oliver spends more time with us. And he's thriving. The facts are also," I said, counting on my fingers like I was back at the warehouse inventory desk, "that you've engineered that time. You've bypassed me. And you've used money to build a narrative. And one more fact, you don't know yet." He smirked. "Enlighten me." "Soon," I said. "Right now. We're still at dinner." He scoffed. But a sliver of uncertainty faltered his smile. Tessa noticed. Her eyes flicked to me, searching for a bridge back to the version of us that called each other when the car wouldn't start. I looked away first. The bridge was under repair. From the den, Oliver's voice rose. "Delighted. Grandma. It holds." My mother laughed. "Of course it does. Your dad's good with bridges." The line hit me like a blessing I wasn't sure I deserved. I stood. "I'm taking Oliver home after dessert," I said. "We'll talk tomorrow. All of us. With someone who doesn't share our last name." Julian opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. Camille frowned like a public relations plan had sprung a leak. My dad poured more coffee with a shaky hand. Tessa looked at me. Then, at the folder. Then at the closed den door as if a different choice might be hiding behind it. I walked to the den and watched through the glass for a beat. Oliver's bridge arced between 2 stacks of cookbooks. ribbon roads curling off both ends. The faint mustard crescent on his sweater caught the lamplight. A small moon over his heart. He saw me, and waved me over. Grinning. In that pure way that makes adults vow impossible things. I pressed my palm to the glass for a second. The pain was cool. On the other side, my son adjusted a paper ramp with surgical concentration. He looked up again, waiting to see if I would come hold the middle while he added weight. I opened the door. I've got the center, I said. Good. He beamed, handing me the bridge. This part matters most. The morning after Christmas. The house felt like a stage. After the audience had gone home, cheap tinsel. A few paper cups. The ghost of voices still hanging from the ceiling. Oliver slept late with his arm flung over his face. The way he does when he's decided light is an opponent. I stood in the kitchen and counted the seconds between coffee drips. The mustard crescent on his sweater hung over a chair like a small moon we'd borrowed and forgotten to return. Tessa came out barefoot. Hair in a knot. Eyes rimmed red. She looked older and younger at the same time. Like two photographs layered wrong. We should talk, she said. We will, I answered. And surprised us both by how calm it sounded. After pancakes. She blinked. As if confused that ordinary food could exist inside extraordinary mess. I don't want to fight in front of him. Then don't, I said. Eat with him. Help him with the new art set. And after I drop him at the park with Gabe for an hour. You and I will talk. She nodded. In the quiet that followed, the word talk stretched like a bridge that might or might not hold. Oliver wandered in, rubbing his eyes. Hair sticking straight up. Humming the two-note tune. He hums when he's checking if the world is safe. I flipped pancakes and told a story about a giant who ate only clouds. He laughed at the right places. Tessa squeezed maple syrup so hard the cap popped off, and syrup dripped onto the counter in a slow amber bead. We all stared at it like it was a meteor. After breakfast, I texted Gabe, "Need you at the playground in 22 Faced." He replied with a thumbs up and then, because he knows me. Another message. Bring receipts. I smiled without intending to. On the walk to the park, Oliver skipped to avoid cracks. Are you and Mom mad? He asked without looking up. We're loud, I said. Loud doesn't always mean mad. Sometimes loud means we forgot to use softer words for important things. He considered that. Uncle Julian says important things need schedules. I bet he does, I said. I think important things need sunlight. Gabe was already at the swings when we got there. Hood up against the wind. 2 hot chocolates in a cardboard carrier. He crouched to high-five Oliver. Then nodded toward me. You look like you slept inside a spreadsheet. Not far off. I handed Oliver to him with a look. 1 hour. We'll do laps around the castle, Gabe said. We will not stage a revolution. He winked at Oliver. Unless the slide union demands it. I watched them run toward the pirate ship structure as if momentum itself were a safety harness. Then I turned and walked back. Tessa was waiting at the kitchen table with the folder Julian had so helpfully curated. She had added a stack of our own late notices. Utility bills. Arrant ledger. A school flyer with doodles in the margins. She had always been a neat piler. I sat opposite her and placed my own small stack down, a printout of our phone records for the last 3 months. A screenshot of the school portal's emergency contacts page. And, face down, an envelope I had printed at the library, because I wanted something to hold. Inside was the lab report. Not yet, I told myself. Not yet. Okay, I said. Timelines first. Then motivus. Then plans. She pulled her sweater tighter. I don't have motives, Daniel. I have fears. Fears can be motives if you let them drive, I said gently. October. That's when things accelerated. Why? She hesitated. Because the landlord raised the rent in September. Because the warehouse cut your overtime. Because Oliver started chewing his sleeves before school, and I thought structure. I thought if mornings were less chaotic, he'd feel better. Why Julian? I asked. Why not ask Gabe for morning drop-offs? Why not my dad? Why not a parent in Oliver's class? Because Julian offered, she said. And there it was. The simple, awful truth. He was there. He had answers. He said we didn't have to be embarrassed. I slid the phone records across to her. You and Julian spoke for 47 minutes the night I worked the double on October 11th. For an hour and 8 minutes on November 2nd. For 29 minutes at midnight on December 5th. Are those all about cocoa with tiny marshmallows? Her eyes flicked to the numbers and away. He was advising. On what my schedule, my son, our marriage. On how to keep Oliver steady. She said. Too quickly. We sat with it. The refrigerator hummed. A household machine, doing its job with none of our drama. Finally, she whispered. I didn't want to feel small. Dan. Julian made it sound like logistics. Like a puzzle we could solve. With you. Every talk about money felt like the floor opening. I know. I said. I hate that I make you feel that way. She looked up. Startled. I took a breath. It doesn't erase the choice to sign papers in secret. Two truths can exist and still be a mess. Tessa wiped her eye. If I could unsign. You can. I said. You call the attorney. You revoke your consent. You tell Julian to stop. And then we find help that doesn't look like ownership. He won't stop. She said. And something in her voice made a line inside me darken. It wasn't admiration. It was certainty. I opened the school portal screenshot. You changed the emergency contacts on December 10th. I said. You moved Julian and Camille to the top. You removed Gabe and my shift supervisor. That was me trying to be practical. She said. You're hard to reach when you're on the forklift. And I'm his father even when I'm under a pallet of soda. A sound behind me made me turn. My mother stood in the doorway with a tin of leftover cookies. Her face arranged into what she must have practiced in the mirror, a neutral that invited truce. I brought oatmeal raisin. She said. As if raisins could mediate. Are we? We're talking. I said. We're fine. She set the tin down. Looked at our papers. And picked at a thread on the tablecloth. Your father is worried the neighborhood is changing. He says there were sirens last week near your block. Sirens mean the system is working. I said. Somebody called for help. Help came. That's not how your father hears them. Then he can get hearing aids. I muttered. And instantly regretted the cheap shot. My mother's mouth tightened. Sorry. She exhaled. Nobody here wants to take Oliver away from you. Then, stop behaving like you do. I said. Not unkindly. Tell Julian to slow down. Her eyes flickered. And I recognized the family relay. My words passed to her. Then to my father. Then on to Julian. Who would translate them into bullet points. I'll talk to him. She said. Don't. I replied. He doesn't hear you. He hears himself confirming himself. My mother. Who has mediated every squabble since 1996. I've surprised me then. She reached across and squeezed my hand. You are a good father. She said. Each word careful. You cook pancakes even when your heart is breaking. That matters. Then she let go. Picked up the cookie tin. And left like she'd delivered a secret package and didn't want to be seen. When the door closed, Tessa stared at me. Why did you print phone records? Why does it feel like you're building a case? Because I am. I said. Because Julian already did. She leaned back. And what is your case? That Oliver is not a project. That money doesn't crown a parent. That whoever orchestrated this underestimated my memory for dates and the way the truth hums when you stand close to it. Whoever orchestrated, she stopped. Because the sentence had nowhere safe to land. I stood and rinsed our coffee cups. The normal sound of water, almost shocking in its kindness. There's one more thing. I said. Keeping my back to her, so I could finish the sentence before seeing her face. Last month. I ordered a lab test. I told myself it was for paperwork. I knew that wasn't the whole reason. The quiet was the kind you can taste. What did you test? She asked. And her voice was not quite steady. I turned then. And the kitchen seemed suddenly very small. I'm not telling you yet. I said. I'm telling all of us. Together. When Julian is in the room, and no one can edit the story afterward. Her shoulders sagged. Secrets on top of secrets. Truths on top of strategies. I said. You started the strategy. I'm finishing it with light. She stared at the envelope on the table as if it were a coiled thing. If it says what I think it says. You don't know what it says. I replied. And if you do? Then that's a different conversation. A car door thumped outside. Gabe's knock was 2 quick taps. Then a longer one. I opened the door, and Oliver rushed past me. Breathless. Dad. My team won the slide race, he announced. We named ourselves the Comets. Strong name, I said. Did you wipe your shoes? Yes. He held up the bottoms for inspection. Because he likes rules when they're clear. Gabe stepped inside and shot me a look over Oliver's head. You okay? I nodded. Maybe. He saw the papers and whistled softly. Looks like the Senate in here. We're making pancakes of justice, Oliver declared, merging conversations in the way only kids can. Gabe crouched to Oliver's level. Hey, Comet Captain. Can I borrow your dad for a grown-up minute? Oliver considered. Then bestowed permission with a solemn nod. He went to the living room and began setting up car ramps with an engineer's frown. Gabe and I stepped into the hallway. He kept his voice low. I talked to a friend who works at the courthouse. Guardianship won't fly without your consent unless you're proven unfit. Which you're not. But I also heard Julian has a meeting booked with the school principal on the 28th. He's going to push the stability narrative. Hard. I figured. I said. Thanks. You still sitting on that lab result? Daniel schedules a neutral mediation for Deck 27 to stop relatives, especially Julian and Camille, from steering decisions about his son. Oliver. He restores dual authorization at school and sets the rule that no one talks about Oliver like he isn't present. In mediation, Daniel demands Tessa revoke her consent to temporary guardianship and halt all unilateral outreach. Tessa agrees. A 72-hour pause is set. With a follow-up. At a family dinner. Daniel reveals 2 documents, a paternity test excluding him as Oliver's biological father, and an avuncular test strongly indicating Julian is a first-degree relative to Oliver. He also shows text suggesting a long, hidden entanglement. Shocked. Tessa apologizes. Camille quietly leaves. Julian drops his polished tone. Daniel states the immediate plan: Oliver stays with him. Tessa moves to her sister's Pradas. All future steps go through mediation. And school records require both signatures. Gabe drafts a short, temporary agreement. Daniel reassures Oliver that he's still his dad, and that adults will tell the truth without making Oliver a prize. They end the night preparing Oliver's science fair volcano Mount Truth as a calm, constructive next step.